สวัสดีครับแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านนะครับ Welcome ladies and gentlemen. This is a book launch. It's a very VIP book launch though because we have the story about a man who is a political hero in his country. And it's a rare opportunity because we don't have a lot of political heroes in this modern day and age. This is the book, Anwar Returns, The Final Twist. And if you have the opportunity to read through it, it's quite a journey. Because, you know, if you read the history of modern day politics in developing countries across the globe, what you rarely find is a story of a guy who's able to make it from the very bottom as an activist, you know, all the way up to the upper echelons of government, holding office as high as Deputy Prime Minister. Through that, spending about 20 months in jail back in the year of 1974 as an activist, 20 months in jail, rising out of that, entering politics, after going into politics, essentially becoming a part of the state, a part of the establishment, being thrown in jail for 5 years. And then after that, another journey to prison in 2015. But on top of that, a full-fledged royal pardon in October 2018, and a potential return to the upper echelon of his country's politics. You know, most politicians, especially in Southeast Asia, are lucky enough if they can make it out of office in one piece. You know, you've got unlucky ones who are divorced out of office. You've got others who, after a successful career, are prosecuted. Some live in exile. You've got the really lucky ones who are able to have a legendary career and at the end of the day serve a higher purpose in society, doing charity work. But you don't have a lot of politicians who have spent time in prison for 3 times and then have basically the entire country expecting that you could potentially become the prime minister. That's unheard of. Okay, so this is the book, Anwar Returns, The Final Twist, and in about 20 or so minutes, I'm going to have the opportunity to interview someone who is a household name in Thailand's media as well, not just in Malaysia. The story so far in his life is quite amazing, and what I'm going to try to do is ask about his political future as well as reforms in his country's politics, and perhaps a little bit of comparative politics if that can be endeavored. Right? But before we get to all of that, we're going to start with an introductory speech. You know, if you go back to the year 1997, back during the times of the Asian financial crisis, Thailand also has a legendary figure, you know, a controversial figure, make no mistake. And he got the opportunity to know and to Seri, Anwar Ibrahim, while they both were basically trying to guide their respective countries out of the mess that was the Asian financial contagion. So the introductory speech is going to be given by none other than former finance minister นะครับท่านอดีตรัฐมนตรีว่าการกระทรวงการคลังนะครับจะเชิญคุณธนงพิทยะดร.ธนงพิทยะ is going to be coming up on stage delivering the introductory speech for Capital Seri Anwar Ibrahim.
Excellency, honorable guests, media friends, we are gathering here today to participate in the international launch of the book Anwar Returns, The Final Twist by Mark TROWELL, and to meet Dato Seri Anwar Ibrahim, the man who is a born political leader for his relentless fighting spirit for human rights and political governance. I was fortunate to have met Anwar when we were both finance ministers in meetings among ASEAN leaders on how we should be united in resolving the economic crisis. Anwar always offered help and explained to us how Malaysia survived through the crisis with its own financial restructuring methods. I also remember our attempt with Japan to establish Asian Monetary Fund to strengthen Asian countries with more appropriate strategy to prevent any future crisis. However, the proposal was rejected during the World Bank meeting in Hong Kong. Throughout those days, our personal discussions always concentrated on the difficulties of crisis resolution. But sometimes we also jokingly chat about the ignorance of our leaders on economic matters. To fight for governance, justice and poverty, Anwar's life was abundantly filled with twists. When he was the finance minister to Malaysia, he was always against the widespread of nepotism and cronyism that are the roots of corruption. However, the misery consequence was absurd political trials and almost 11 years in jail. During this time, Anwar always had a choice. In fact, through our encouragement, all the friends of Anwar, the choice to refuge in many countries that would welcome him. But he refused to do so. His spiritual strength and belief to defend his victimized life in his own motherland made him a true hero of Malaysia. I do pray that this final twist will give Anwar the opportunity to successfully handle political, social, and economic activities for Malaysia and bring about peaceful harmony for ASEAN and the world. I would like to end my short remark here so we can listen to Mark TROWELL, and the writer of the book, and then enjoy the exclusive interview with our guest of honor. However, I would like to thank the ISRA Institute for hosting this event, Mr. Pansak Aripakato, who for summarizing the book in Thai in the website of ISRA Institute, the Royal Orchid Cheratan for the excellent arrangement for this event too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the former finance minister, Dr. At this time, let us welcome the man who actually wrote this book. He interviewed Anwar many times throughout his life. Mr. Mark TROWELL.
Thank you for those kind words, and thank you to all of you for coming this evening. Sawadika. I must say I'm delighted to be in one of my favourite countries, and I don't say that about every country I visit. I've been here many times for pleasure and also for business. And I've always had a great time here to meet its charming people, the buzz that is Bangkok, and certainly the amazing food, which I have never tired of. It's never, in foreign countries of course, it's measured for the farang, so that it's nice and sweet, but it doesn't have the bite that the true Thai food has. And I must also say this, that the Kingdom of Thailand is, I think, the only country in the Southeast Asian region that has not been colonised by foreign powers, which gives it a distinct cultural flavour and a unique identity. So, let's talk about the book. This is the launch of the third and hopefully final book about the trials and tribulations of Dati Seri and Anwar Ibrahim. It's an amazing story on any level, but incredibly, it's true. And it records the 20-year struggle of Anwar, and I call him Anwar not out of disrespect, but it's just too long to keep calling him Dati Seri Anwar Ibrahim. And I'm an egalitarian Australian, and we're not really comfortable with too many titles. So it records his struggle to overcome attempts to destroy him politically, and to right the grave injustice committed against him and the Malaysian people. Anwar Ibrahim has, through his courage and determination and unswerving belief that justice and the people would see him through his turmoil, has emerged from being a political prisoner to the Prime Minister of Malaysia in waiting. And that's truly a remarkable statement at any level. The book documents the corruption of Malaysia's institutions and the undermining of its political and moral values which culminated in his imprisonment. And it's not just about Anwar Ibrahim. It also records the decline of Malaysia's democracy over the last 20 years and its resurrection in what is known as General Election 14, which occurred this year. Let's start from the bottom line. The question most asked of me in relation to Anwar Ibrahim is this. You're a lawyer, you saw the trial, and you saw the appeals. Is he guilty of the charge? I can tell you right now, no. And I can tell you not based upon intuition or some opinion based on some legal principle. I can tell you because the evidence proved that he was innocent. Now, no person in Malaysia or most countries has to prove his or her innocence. But in this case, it was patently obvious that the DNA evidence, which was the primary evidence against him, had been fabricated. It was false. The only other evidence against him was the young man who made the complaint that he'd been sexually assaulted, by the name of Mohammed Saiful. Saiful, on his own account and unwittingly, admitted effectively that he'd been part of a political conspiracy to convict Anwar, meeting not only the Deputy Prime Minister, who was then Najib Razak, but also senior police officers and members of Parliament, members of the ruling party. All of those meetings took place before the alleged incident is said to have occurred. Maybe they were there to discuss the weather, who knows? But, you know, you'd have to be quite foolish to think that what was taking place was an attempt to entrap, to falsely accuse Anwar of this crime. That was brushed aside by the senior courts, as was the exposure over the DNA, which was false, because the expert, the Australian expert for the defence in DNA concluded this. He said that DNA may have been Anwar Ibrahim, but it doesn't necessarily come from semen. But I can tell you this, he said, it certainly was not the sample taken from the alleged victim. It could not have been that. Again, the appeal courts brushed it aside, claiming that that opinion was simply an armchair opinion. That was something that the judges deliberately and corruptly ignored. And they did so because they played the tune that was given to them by the ruling party. So that answers that question. So why then was Anwar Ibrahim prosecuted? He was prosecuted out of fear. Fear of losing power to Anwar, because it was a close-run thing in the general election of 2013. And that gave them a scare because they sensed what was coming. The wave that would be sweep them out in general election 14 was on its way. Secondly, fear of losing power after 60 years of controlling government, which is effectively a one-party state. And finally, fear that all the corruption and the abuse of power would be exposed and prosecuted. While you have power, you can protect yourself. But once that power is gone, once the electorate votes you out of office, then you have to take your chances like any citizen. And we see that now unfolding in Malaysia and other countries. And it's the fear that led to a series of desperate measures by the previous government in the years leading through the general election in 13 and to 18. Such things as invoking the so-called terrorist powers, which were of an excessive nature, but designed obviously to replace legislation that they had in place to jail people without cause. All of that apparently is now to be swept away with certain provisos by the new government. Tabaseri himself was imprisoned, as has been noted, under the Internal Security Act, as did many leading figures in Malaysia. That legislation was abandoned, was repealed by the former government, but they managed to then slip to using different legislation, which is the Sedition Act. In Malaysia, sedition means anything you want it to mean, and had the effect of disqualifying sitting members of parliament if they were convicted of that. Okay, so that's the background to it, and that's the reasons why he was convicted. So how did I come to write the story? Well, I'm an Australian lawyer, it's probably obvious by my accent, and I was appointed by a number of international organisations, including Interparliamentary Union and Laurasia and other organisations based in Australia, to observe the legal proceedings being conducted, prosecution against Anwar Ibrahim in Malaysia. I'd previously been there with the great Kapil Singh, who was a legendary Malaysian great patriot, who unfortunately did not live to see what has taken place in Malaysia. But my first observation was Anwar's successful appeal against his conviction in 2014, and then secondly, it's the successful trial that took place in the High Court of Malaysia when he was acquitted of the very charge, and finally the two appeals in the Federal Court, the Court of Appeal of Malaysia, which did convict him and resulted in his imprisonment. The book also covers his release from prison and his unconditional pardon by the King of Malaysia. Now mostly, pardons are given on condition that you admit your guilt and you seek atonement for your sins effectively. But this was an unconditional pardon, which meant there was no admission of guilt whatsoever. and I would never have accepted it on that basis. And the King accepted that. And after reading my second book, apparently given to him by Dr. was convinced that a terrible wrong had been committed against Anwar and was rushed to unconditionally pardon. The book's written by a lawyer, but it's not, you don't have to be a lawyer to understand it. I'm told by a journalist it's an easy read. I'm not sure that he meant it was too simplistic or didn't lack content, but I think it's something that can be read quite easily by people who are not lawyers. Can I just briefly explain the book titles? You'll see within the book there are three sections. The first section is the prosecution of Dr. Anwar Ibrahim, and that was the charge that was brought against him and for which he was acquitted in the High Court of Malaysia. His second book was called The Final Play. It was quite intentional because what I attempted to convey was the fact that the desperation had started to set in with the ruling party. So this was their final gambit, this was their final play to remove Anwar from politics by having him falsely charged, convicted, imprisoned, which meant they would take him out of politics, probably in a semi or permanent way. And the third book, which is the title of this volume, is The Final Twist, because it was all turned on its head. Everything that had gone before it suddenly changed in Malaysia. The party had been in power and exercised it ruthlessly and tried desperately through every political trick to hold on to power, lost government. And everything followed from that. And it happened not through violence, but through the power of the ballot box, which is a remarkable story in itself. In Southeast Asia, Malaysia leads the way in terms of being a demonstrably democratic nation. And it's proved that. And that's made the victory even more incredible. What then is there a message from the book? I suppose in some ways there is. And, but there's lessons not only for Malaysia, I think, in what's contained in the story. Clearly, economic prosperity is necessary for a vibrant democracy, a vibrant country. But it's not enough, is it? So long as you're prosperous, of course, you can put up with privations and put up with inconveniences. But at the end of the day, of course, if it's not prosperity, that tends to cause discontent. But a country also needs stability. That's why everything fell apart in Malaysia for the ruling party, because the stability was lacking. It's probably what's happening in the United States right now. It's probably why Australia has had, 4 prime ministers in the last 8 years. So if people are convinced that a government is acting corruptly, clearly they're going to be convinced that it's acting corruptly against their interests, not only financially, but in the moral sense. And that politicians are only interested in advancing their own personal agendas and always have their hands out waiting for bribes. Well, that's changed in Malaysia because what happened was the public corruption became public news. The one MBD financial scandal that you've all read about showed an extreme failure in governance. It was corrupting not only of individuals, but also the institutions most precious in any community, executive government, parliament, the courts, the police, and even the army. And what happened in Malaysia filtered down through every level of the community. And all of them, effectively by doing nothing, became complicit in that crime. The corruption was not just the theft of billions of dollars, but also the factor that attacked the very fabric of civil society in Malaysia. Anwar's prosecution and imprisonment was a symptom of that malaise. He was in Parliament, and how it came about was he was, I think, the first to raise in Parliament questions about what seemed to be shortfalls in the funds of government. And of course, he was getting very close. Not all was known about it at that stage. It was unfolding bit by bit. But he was the danger because in Parliament he was raising questions about the funds that the government had invested on behalf of the people of Malaysia. And he was seen clearly as a threat, and he was removed. But the prosecution backfired, ironically, because he's not shy, of course, of speaking to the media. You probably don't know that, but that's true. He's very comfortable with them. And he sells a very direct message of integrity, honesty, and also speaks about policies. And speaks in Malaysia about that everyone is a Malaysian, not based on race, but based on the fact that they were born in Malaysia or were citizens of that country. That's problematical in Malaysia because of the different racial blend, but it's possible. It's possible for countries to regard all of their citizens as being one. But his prosecution backfired on him because every time he went to court, he was able to give a media conference. And as hard as the police tried to stop him, they couldn't, and they would seem worse for doing so. So it really kept highlighting over a number of years of what was happening in the country. And when Anwar was convicted on the appeal and sentenced to 5 years imprisonment, he turned to me and he said, I was sitting immediately behind the dock where prisoners sit, and he said to me, this is good. This is a good result. I said, what? He said, this is a good result for Malaysia, because now they will see what this government is doing to corrupt this country. Is that not an amazing statement? There was no consideration for his own welfare. His major concern was for his country, for the good of Malaysia. So that's all I wanted to say about that. It's probably, obviously I'm not the main act, so I hate to take up too much time saying that. But can I just say something about this? I'd hate to leave Thailand without just making a few comments, because I introduced this concept about stability and prosperity. Thailand really seems to be a happening place. We all know there was political instability. I've been here and observed a trial on behalf of the Interparliamentary Union about that. It was a grim time for Thailand, with deaths in the street and violent clashes of demonstrators. And whatever side people took, it didn't matter, did it? Because it was a threat really to the stability and the economic welfare of the country. And it had to be resolved. But the stability in the last few years has seen the economy grow, with strong growth in tourism. I see that. It's hard to get a chair downstairs with all the tourists. And the other thing is, I think that investors are probably feeling a bit more confident about this country, as they are about Malaysia. Because in Malaysia, they no longer have to bribe officials and government ministers who start owning a humble house and living in a palace. That means that your community, the Thai community and the Malaysian community should be doing good business. With the stability that you have and the opportunities that are available, and you share a common border. So I'm not here to make to advertise or promote trade between the two countries, but it just is an observation I thought I should make, because stability and economic prosperity are essential in the Asian region. And whether it's accepted or not, Australia regards itself as part of that region and always seeks to encourage stability, democracy, and institutions that value those principles. So there you go. You got that for nothing. I didn't value add that. Can I just say one thing though, before I finish? There is a very important person here by the name of Dato David Yon. He's the gentleman sitting over there with the tie. He's a very humble man, and he will clearly be embarrassed by the remarks that I made. Most of you, if not all of you, at least know him or have heard of him. He's an international businessman with an impeccable reputation for integrity and vision. and he is a strident Anwar supporter. Oh, he'll tell Anwar when he disagrees with him, as he'll tell most people. But you may not know that he was a senator in the Malaysian Parliament until July 2009, when he and I think 2 or 3 other senators of the Malaysian Chinese Association, which was part of the ruling party, defected. They left the ruling government and they joined Anwar's opposition party, PKR. And it was a big move for them to make. But David said that whatever the repercussions, he wanted to stand on the right side of history. And so he was. And when he told people that ultimately Malaysia would become a two-party state, in the sense there would be a government and a proper opposition, it took 10 years, but that happened. And he stood by Anwar in the roller coaster politics of the next 20 years, then 10 years rather, but he never wavered in his support and belief that Anwar Ibrahim would be the man to lead Malaysia. And many offers were made to him by the government to come back, to redeem himself to come back, but he wouldn't do it. And he often says to me, Anwar, he says, you know, Anwar is a good man. What he means by that is that Anwar is a man of character and vision and with a strong sense of decency. And isn't that the sort of person you would want leading your country? But for David, I must say, these books would never have happened. The account would never have been told. Anwar's daughter, Nurul, said to me, look, you're writing these reports. It was her idea to start with. You're writing these reports. You really must record this so people will know what happened over the 20-year period, because otherwise it just gets lost in newspaper stories that no one remembers after a length of time. So Nurul and David Yeo and a fellow called Michael Bong, who's since deceased, we went to see the publishers and virtually pushed me into writing this book. And David even bought huge numbers of books to distribute to universities, distribute to people so they would know what happened. And he was determined that Anwar's story be told and recorded, not only for Malaysians, but for people everywhere. He has only one failing, I have to say. Do you all know who Michelle Yeoh is? No? She was a Bond girl, huh? And she's in that wonderful, very, very entertaining movie, Rich Crazy Asians. She's the very same mother. She's magnificent. She's gorgeous. David's not her husband. As much as he'd like to be, they share the same name, but David's not her husband. Okay. So well, you can't have everything. Anyway, thank you. I just thought I needed to say that about David, because I know he gets embarrassed about that, because he prefers to do things with anonymity, but he couldn't escape tonight. So look, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I know you want to hear from Dadasili rather than hear me rub it on, but I suppose the book sort of brings it together, and I really urge you to read it, seriously, to read it, because it really is, obviously I'm a bit biased about that, but it really is it's something that's worth sharing, and something that I think young people should also understand about Malaysia and maybe get some insight into how they should conduct their affairs in their own country. Thank you very much.
You have to read the 398 pages in the book to do his speech justice. No further ado, let's welcome on stage the main event. Yes, leader of the Pakatan Harapan Coalition and president of the People's Justice Party, former Deputy Prime Minister, Dato Seri Anwar Ibrahim. Test how loud you sound on that microphone. Okay, he's going to put that microphone on. If it works well, then you don't have to hold the microphone. Okay. This is the first time I'm meeting you, so I'm quite nervous. But I'm going to try. Tell me by now. Okay. Nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think the media wants more than their share of questions, but I'm going to go through mine first. Okay. Have you read this book, sir?
Yes, of course. And I had all the time in prison to go through.
Can you give us, just for a good beginning, kind of a quick review? What do you think about it? Do you fully endorse everything in it? And what's your take on the book? Just briefly.
Mark is, of course, a brilliant counsel, but he's fiercely independent. I had a series of meetings with him every time I appear in court, but it is his interpretation, and based on facts, of course. And as I said, he's fiercely independent, doesn't care actually what I have to say. So there are some, of course, issues that I thought would have crafted differently. But I think the strength of the book is because it confines mainly the entire episode in the trial, and then the interpretation what happened in court, because he saw me there, and some of the great counsels that represented me, including the late Karpal Singh.
In terms of accuracy, like how would you say at what percent is it accurate? Like 90% or all of it accurate? What's
it is a very objective account because what transpired in the proceedings, the prosecution, the defense, the decision or the judgment, all were recorded. And I think this can be defended because they are in the proceedings of the court. And then probably his own understanding of the law, the contradictions, the disregard for the rule of law, the facts, and I think these were brilliantly recorded. And as you know, he has impeccable credentials, representing the Australian Bar, the International Commission of Juries, International Parliamentary Union, who looked up to him for an objective assessment and account. And I think that is one of the reasons why I finally agreed to endorse and be present during the launch.
Did you expect to be here at this moment, looking back during the elections, during that time, while you were still going through the tough times? Did you expect that things would work out in this fashion, that you would come out, have a book launch, just several months after what's gone down? How do you feel about being here today?
It's an interesting question because most people outside, including Tun Mahathir, thought that it would be difficult. I mean, it's a challenging path to assume that we can win. I was the minority. I mean, I was quite sure they will make it, But I was in prison, I had no choice but to be more positive and optimistic, I thought. But based on the account of the fact that in 2013, we garnered 52% of the popular vote. And I thought with the presence of Mahathir, who had rather known to the country, and the willingness to adopt the reformasi agenda, and came to see me, although very, very frankly, it was not easy, it was a very painful decision, but I thought between the tribulations and trials of Anwar and the interests of the nation, I and Mahathir decided that the interest of the nation must take precedence. So we worked together at that time, it was certainly almost a year prior to the elections. And I believe that that decision would certainly improve our chances, because certainly Mahathir would be able to attract certain percentage of voters, particularly the rural voters, because I think in the urban areas we had from ethnic Chinese, ethnic Indians, and the Malays in the urban areas were clearly supportive throughout the country. But in the rural areas, the issue of penetration of the media and a controlled environment was difficult, and Mahathir did play a significant role. And I will, of course, give credit to him for that.
I want to ask a question about a passage in the book that Mr. TROWELL wrote, and it has to do with his expectation of what would happen after the trial that you went through, and it has to do with.
Okay, let me just read this.
Page 291. A return to judicial independence, and it has to do with the trial that you went through. One question posed in my 2005 report was whether it could be said that the federal court decision to uphold Anwar's appeal represented a change of direction for the judiciary. In other words, was it an independent and impartial decision made without any political interference? TROWELL wrote that I concluded there was probably little doubt that the federal court decision would not have been possible under Dr. Mahathir's regime, given his considerable influence over the judiciary. Okay. Now, I don't want you to criticize, Dr. Mahathir, but I'm basically posing you a question about the judiciary, because that was a time when you were dealt with all of these, verdicts. And then for outsiders who condemned the actions undertaken by the government against you, they felt that why did the judiciary branch go along with these charges? Now that you're out, how do you feel about the judiciary? And whether or not, they are political after all this time, looking back.
Why do you choose to ask difficult questions?
Because this was the point where I felt that his conclusion was something that is it's an interesting point of for you.
Okay, I agree. No, we have said, and I think based on facts, that the judiciary was certainly being used, worked, decided, and at the behest of the executive. Yes, it happened even earlier during Tun Mahathir's time, although he suggests that sometimes he did not give specific instructions, but the system was such that people would choose to decide based on what they consider or think that the leadership wanted. But again, to the credit of Mahathir, he said, yes, there were decisions in the past. I'm not going to defend all the excesses, but I'm here now committed to the reform agenda. And I was there in Parliament. I just won the seat after a week in Parliament and heard him speak during the review, the midterm review of our 5-year plan, when he said that this country must move and support the reformasi agenda. Judicial independence, free media, professional, credible enforcement agencies. And I think it was a remarkable feat for a person, for a leader, 93 years old, and decide to support in the interest of the future of this country.
Does that type of environment that was mentioned by the author still exist, or is it kind of rare and only in some cases? Meaning that is the judiciary branch mostly, for the most part, not political?
We can't say it represents all judges, but certainly the senior judges and the judiciary were generally regarded as working at the behest of the executive there was a compelling study by the UN Rapporteur on the independence of judiciary as far back as the 2000 or 2001. We gave incontrovertible evidence how decisions were made and decided against basic rules and procedures of justice. So I don't think one can defend the judiciary in the past, and we have to therefore ensure that these gross injustices will not be repeated. It's interesting what the king said to me. You know, in my case, it was from prison straight to the palace. So there was no opportunity. I didn't go to the house. About the time when the pardon board was due to meet with the king in the palace with Tun Mahathir, the prime minister, I got a message from the palace said, come and for an audience with the king. I said, if I was in prison and I didn't have a suit and the songkor at the time, so we had to struggle quickly and got this ready and then rush to the palace. So to me it's remarkable feat, not because of just the palace, but when the king then told me, and he said that I understand the case, I followed the proceedings, and I'm not doing this because it is my prerogative or my power, but I'm convinced that you're innocent, and I don't want, he says, Anwar, he repeated, you must remember this. This should not happen again to any citizen of this country. So I thought it is a great feat from the king to say that, and I of course, and I said, Your Highness, this is a major statement from Your Highness, because you're talking about the failure and the corruption of the judiciary, the travesty of justice. He said, yes, you can repeat, because I'm supposed to give a major lecture at that time, and I did repeat.
So the reform agenda is going to definitely include the judiciary and things that need to be done to make sure that it cannot be used as an apparatus to go after politicians.
That's the pillar. You can talk about democracy without the rule of law. The judiciary must be the bastion, and it must remain fiercely independent.
Okay. Asking this on behalf of, let's say there was a journalist in Malaysia looking for fairness against the former PM who was being elected, basically thrown out of office. Can it be guaranteed that prosecutions against former Prime Minister Najib Razak over corruption will be done in a way that whereby the judiciary branch is allowed that type of independence? Can you guarantee that?
I've had discussions with Tun Mahathir, and our decision was clear. It must be not only deemed to be independent, but perceived by the society as independent. Some of us are not happy with the fact that with this huge scandal and squandering of billions of dollars, and you get free on bail. But that is the decision of the judge. Umpteen cases being thrown against him and still continue to get bail. But I think this is an ample evidence that we must respect the rule of law. We fought not against Najib per se, but against a corrupt, oppressive system. And we cannot, there is no raison d'etre to form a government or to be in government if we, out of anger or vendetta, then decide to prosecute him and do not guarantee and respect the due process. I mean, the statement was public. I said, yes, we are very angry. Some of us want to send to jail. After all, my lockup in prison is still vacant. But I made it very clear that the process can be prolonged and arduous because it is through an independent judicial process.
Let's talk a bit about those years in prison, if you don't mind. Just in terms of conditions, you probably have heard stories about Thai prison. One newspaper provided, one TV channel, no news. What is it like in a Malaysian prison? Was it no seriously? Was it VIP or was it like thoroughly bad?
Let me establish the facts. Many of my friends and colleagues in Indonesia, Malaysia, and in the Philippines, when I was talking to Arab, Estrada was the assume that I would be given the same treatment. But I said to the contrary. I said Republic. I was in the lockup. The first few weeks, I was on the floor, on the cement floor in prison. And because of my age, my back surgery, but I was sick. After that, I was given a small hospital bed.
So at the beginning, no bed,
No bed,
pillows,
no pillows.
no pillows. Okay.
But it was okay. Take it. I mean, no choice anyway. And dreadful lack of food. No food can be brought in from outside. So I kept on losing weight. Only after that, the doctors gave some milk or cereals. But the point is, I was in solitary confinement all those years. I speak to no one. No one is supposed to greet me because there is a CCTV camera opposite my lockup.
Was this in the 2015 or the 1999?
Both, in fact, I was in the same lockup.
Solitary lockup.
Solitary confinement.
We're talking about how many years now?
Well, total of almost 9 years. Yeah. I mean, 5 or 6, and
Okay, that is bad. Okay, that's worse than the case for Thai politicians. I thought you had it pretty good. Okay. No, but how were you able to keep up with what's happening outside?
how do I keep my sanity? Sing some songs.
No, but books, do they let you read
My
stuff?
favorite song, Please Release Me and Let Me Go. Now, more serious, you meditate, you must enhance your spiritual strength. But I then rationalize to myself, look, I'm trying to fight the corrupt system. I mean it. I want my people to survive and live in a vibrant democratic environment. I am very passionate with the poor. I mean, I started being imprisoned because of my fight against poverty. I mean, against the treatment of the poor. And accepting that fact, you have to endure. And friends all over the world were kind enough to send me books. Now, the first few months I had problems because they give me only 2 books per week. Oh, it's not enough. Because you can finish, what do you do from 8 in the morning to 12 at night? Just reading books. That's why I seem to be sounding a bit smarter and wiser now. So some of you have some difficulty or not enough time to read. Go to prison. But, now, so I read.
Did the process did the process make you become more of a religious man because of praying and meditation and things like that?
No, I'm honest. I mean, I don't make pretension that I'm, very religious, meditate all the time. I just said that I follow a very strict regime. For example, wake up 5:30 in the morning after prayers, meditate, or read the Quran. Then from 8 o'clock, read. I mean, I read the classics. I've said before that I've read the entire works of Shakespeare with copious notes 4.5 times. You reread all the classic Boris Pasternak, Leo Tolstoy, Anna Akhmatova, and Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, of course, and the latest economic, all known Piketty's recent writings, and Galbraith and Rawls, and you have the times. You just do it. So you just read and just feel that, look, I have to finish this book by tomorrow. And I think, I will not be doing my duty if I do. Of course, I write a lot of notes. I made, whatever I think or reflect, I then make notes out of it on slavery, on poverty, on inequality, on religious tolerance, on the challenge, internal dynamism of the Muslim world, why there's democratic deficit in the Muslim world. I mean, all these issues I make notes.
All right. Let's take to the night when you were released? Because in this book, it depicted quite a festival, a carnival-like atmosphere, page 75, with food trucks and stalls selling coalition T-shirts and merchandise. All the major leaders were there, including his wife, and MPs. And the author goes on to describe that atmosphere. How was that? How joyous was that coming up?
Well, I've been released too many times before. So it's not something new or shocking, but I must not miss this point, which I think Mark also mentioned, that I was very fortunate because my fair lady, Aziza, was just remarkable. It was a pillar of strength for me, and my children were all there for me and very committed and sacrificed a lot. And that has given you a lot of strength. Had you encountered problems, continuous family problems with your wife, your family, when you are in prison, certainly would affect you, your psyche, your strength. But in my case, I was very fortunate. So that night, of course, just after being released, then the series on debuts with international media, and then 15, 20 minutes the family and rush again to this big rally. I was, of course, extremely happy with the family. I was just very excited, and then saw a huge crowd of people, and there's so much affection, and I think it is mutual. I mean, I love my people.
How honestly, how many more years do you expect to maintain this popularity? Because most political heroes, especially in Southeast Asian countries, have their times, and they end up being controversial figures. But for your case, it's quite unique, meaning that your popularity has sustained through decades. Now, still, what do you expect down the road for you in terms of support from the general public?
I think in a way I was fortunate because the worst had been said about me. For example, from the 1998 onwards, I was the agent of umpteen countries. Agent of America, agent of China, agent of India, agent of the Arab world, agent of everything, which makes me a super James Bond. But one thing was never said. I was never said agent of the Thai government. So I mean, everything is said. So the nastiest things you can imagine. A traitor to the country, sodomies, anything can be thrown like that. That people become quite cynical. So now, to me, the responsibility of a leader is to do the right thing, which is not necessarily a popular thing. There were things which was extremely unpopular to the Malay community in 2007 when I crafted the new Malaysian economic agenda to displace the old, obsolete, new economic policy. So many Malay thought that I was so obsessed of trying to retain power and gaining Chinese and Indian support by ignoring the Malay community. I countered by saying that I believe that Malaysia can only succeed if we propel the economy and support market economic reforms, but very strong commitment in terms of affirmative action based on need, not on race. So we went through. So to my mind, we must make the right decision for our people. Tend to be maybe unpopular at a certain period, but I think in the long run, we must decide what we believe is the right decision.
You brought up the Thai government, so you're famous. You have this role whereby you're kind of like a Southeast Asian political legend now. So your comments on regional politics is kind of important. That's why members of the media are here, partly to help promote the book, which you can read in full, 398 pages. But because you brought that up, I just have to pick your brains on this. And I'm trying to use the term picking your brains because I'm not expecting you to take a stance on everything, okay? But eventually, if you become the leader of your government, you probably have to. What is your view in general on what Thailand is going through? I'll come back to Malaysia after this, but just picking your brains. Is what we're going through kind of a necessary thing or something that should...
I'm meeting the Deputy Prime Minister tomorrow morning.
Oh, you are?
But I'm very fortunate because I have some very close dear friends who kept me appraised, some academics from universities, from various political parties and persuasions, Pairoj, of course, Tanong, Sukumat Paribat, you've got a number of friends. And naturally, I mean, they all know that I'm a Democrat. I respect the wisdom of the masses. I do believe that leaders should be condescending and display arrogance. I am a staunch fighter against corruption because it destroys countries and the fabric of states and governments. That's why when asked at the time of the coup d'etat in Thailand, I did say that I'm a Democrat, so naturally I do not necessarily support. Although I understand that the battle has been going on for too long. I was a bit soft in the sense that I said, I don't have an easy solution. So hopefully the military regime would then proceed with elections. Now that they've decided on the elections, I think it is something commendable. I think the past is the past. What is done, it cannot be undone. But at least we look forward to a more meaningful future in Thailand. But Thailand is again its strength. Compared to Malaysia, for example, political development does not necessarily affect, except for the period of some violence or instability. But otherwise, the economy is propelled. This is to me amazing. What have I learned from the experience of Thailand as compared to Malaysia? It's private sector driven. In Malaysia, it's too much controlled by the government institutions. Therefore, at the time of transition, you find no decisions are being made. People are not certain. They have to wait for instructions or directions from the leadership. In Thailand, in a way, it's reassuring because whatever happened in terms of political uncertainties, the private sector continue to drive the economy forward.
So you're positive going ahead on the electoral process, in that it will lead to a stable, positive, democratic outcome?
Well, I read the statement of the elections, and I think I would certainly consider it as a positive. It's up to the people of Thailand to decide. If there is no single party that controls the majority, they have to then continue to negotiate, seek an understanding. I think they have what you call fatigue. I mean, they've fought long enough, so I think they must find some sort of arrangement. And I always say that, look, politics is a method. The ultimate desire must be the country and the people. And if I mean, we are also living in post-normal times. So we have Trump in America. Yes. My God. And you can see this challenge with the trade war with China. I mean, countries have just got to be strong and stable to withstand this and to be smart enough to utilize these differences to propel the economy. But I think one point I want to add on to that is that given this scenario about post-normal times, I mean, it also requires the patience and wisdom of the Thai political leaders then to look forward and forget the past excesses and move on. I mean, it's post-normal also for Anwar to work with Mahathir. And I tell you, it is not easy. It's not normal. It's not normal. It is not normal. but it is in the interest of the country. Now, it could happen. I'm not saying that I'm a good model example, but to show however painful and difficult finally, you have to decide in the interest of your people and your country.
Just comparatively, I promise a little bit of comparative politics. Because when I was a student, UMNO was the party, right? So people were talking that in Southeast Asian countries, you got one-party states like Singapore, and then you got one-party state like Malaysia. But then, like my professor told me that it's not necessarily like that. It's more of a coalition. Now, okay, even though UMNO lost last time, and the wave against the corruption scandals, do you expect any sort of a backlash down the road against whatever is happening now with Dr. Mahathir and your resurgence? Meaning that is the other side that lost. Are they eventually, in your expectation, will they eventually be able to gather some sort of a momentum and get back in the game, or is the UMNO coalition done for good?
It is not in the interest of the country to just finish off UMNO. I mean, the sins of the leaders are clear, but I don't think that members should be punished. I believe that the ruling coalition now under Mahathir can be sustained if we don't commit big blunders or mistakes. If we continue to honor our commitment to a reform agenda, rid the country of corruption, abuse of power, and arrogance, we can sustain. Because this is the only hope for the future where, in a multiracial or pluralistic country, we can give a sense of confidence to every single citizen. Now, UMNO is a race-based party. That's their decision. I mean, I was there as deputy president. Mahathir was there for 22 years as president of the party. They have every right. It's a democratic country. And